You are listening to the Body Charge podcast, and I'm your host, Sandy Sanderson. Welcome to the Body Charge podcast. Today's topic is from anxiety disorder to calm nervous system function. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental health condition globally. About 1 in 5 adults experience an anxiety disorder in any given year. It exerts excessive stress on the body, causing depletion of magnesium, which in turn depresses energy, mental and physical health. My special guest today is Tauna Young, a psychiatric clinician, anxiety and nervous system expert, and the founder of Neurovana Calm, specialising in cranial electrotherapy stimulation, a well-known accessible treatment option for anxiety and insomnia. So welcome aboard, Tauna.
Thank you, Sandy. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. So it's so interesting, this field, because last century we got to know the psychiatric industry liked to use a lot of electroshock therapy, which became very controversial. And so your system of cranial electrotherapy stimulation isn't really like that at all, is it? Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, not at all. And I don't blame people for making that connection, but it's not at all the same thing. This is just a little gentle, tiny little microcurrent that's delivered via little ear clips on your ears. It's just a little teeny tiny 9-volt battery, and it doesn't hurt. It's not, with the electroshock therapy, that's inducing seizures, essentially. This is not even in that same ballpark at all. And it's something that you can do at home without needing to be in a hospital the way that you do with electroshock therapy.
Yeah, so you have experience in the psychiatric industry itself. From that experience, can you shed some light on why the drug therapies are failing and why we don't do talk therapy anymore?
Well, I think that I think a lot of people are doing talk therapy. It's not always as accessible because it's not always affordable. I think medications have their time and place. I'm a prescriber. I'm happy to prescribe medications. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that CES is an excellent companion to medications. It can be used instead of in some cases. When it comes to comparing it to medications, they in some ways don't even belong in the same conversation because with medications, you've got, side effects, you've got, like sexual side effects, weight gain, nausea and vomit, all kinds of stuff. With CES, you don't have any of those. And also there's this in the safety profile, you can't hurt yourself with CES, and with medications,
Oh,
of
that's
course, you
good.
can.
That's good to know. That's like
Yeah.
magnesium. You can put as much on, relax the
Mhm.
muscles, whatever you need, and the body's in control. It's self-regulating that way. So
Yeah.
that's another tool we can use, magnesium. It's natural.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but the thing is, sometimes conditions can become acute. So there's a whole spectrum or intensity spectrum of anxiety disorders. Sometimes it's not so bad, and people can learn to self-regulate and meditate and go out for a run or a walk around the block. They can do something to mitigate if they're taught how to control that early. But sometimes it can get out of hand and then they lose control. The brain just snaps, and then they're a passenger, an observer of their body reacting and doing something that they're not in control of anymore. So I think in that case, someone may be taken to a psychiatric ward in a hospital. They're diagnosed with a psychosis because it got to an extreme level, and they're given drugs. In Australia, anyway, nobody in the hospital does talk therapy anymore like they used to.
Oh,
Yeah, they just
yeah.
straight away administer drugs,
Mhm.
test them out, see which one kind of is tolerated a little bit more, and then send them home. Or sometimes they're stay longer. So it all depends on the individual. But It would be good if they had more tools in the toolbox. And I've spoken to a lot of psychiatric doctors who say, well, we don't have many tools in our toolbox in the public system.
Mhm.
And, sometimes that's all there is. But it's good to know that in the private sector, there are more options available. And those options, I feel, should be doing the least harm, having the least side effects, minimizing that to achieve the goal of helping that person to self-regulate and rebalance and and
Yeah.
engage in self-calm. So with the therapy that you specialize in, the CES, how long does it take a person to learn to do this? And is it an ongoing process or just something you do for a period of time and then is corrected?
So, I think it depends on the situation. I think it can be useful in different contexts. Um, if someone is trying to just like lower their baseline level of anxiety, um, I think it's so a lot of people who try it, they will get benefits within that first minute of trying it. A lot of people do. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. Now, and that's great. But if you want it to be long lasting, it's useful to kind of train the brain to make that calm state its new default setting. A lot of people with chronic stress and anxiety or PTSD, their brains just don't know how to relax. They just aren't familiar with that space. So CES puts the brain in a calm meditative state. And then with continued use, you can train the brain to make that its new normal, make that its new default. But, with just one 20-minute session, Sandy, there was a study where they checked the blood levels of different neurotransmitters, neurohormones. And after just one 20-minute session, people increased their endorphins by 98%. They increased their serotonin by 50%. They increased their melatonin by 25%, their norepinephrine by 24%, reduced cortisol by 18%, and increased their cholinesterase by 8%.
That's
And,
that's amazing. So the
yeah.
body's doing all of that for itself. They're all endogenous chemicals produced
Mhm.
naturally by the brain.
Yeah. Hmm.
So what is it that goes wrong with that system where it forgets how to do that for itself and it needs some kind of prodding from an electrical device? How does that
Yeah,
work?
that's a great question. I don't know that there's one answer for that. I think it depends on the person. I think that, uh, why does sometimes certain things get miscalibrated? It's hard to know. There's often, the nervous system is the bridge between the body and the brain. And sometimes that connection between the two gets a little off. You mentioned previously about something along the lines of people's bodies not always having the ability to calm down. And I think that a lot of times people, intellectually, they know that they're safe. They know that there's nothing, that they're not in danger, but their body doesn't always get that memo. And, your work with magnesium enhances that. And it has some similarities there for sure.
Well, yes, because studies have shown clearly that as magnesium drops in cells, in tissue cells, the propensity to become anxious increases and our sensitivity to stress increases. So we become more
Mhm.
vulnerable, more sensitive to stresses. We can't recover very well. That leads to sleep problems because always you're in fight or flight, feeling unsafe. And why do you feel unsafe? Because the body's trying to give you messages.
Yeah.
The resources are low. The tank is running low. That's the red light. The symptoms are the red light we need to pay attention to. And when we give our body what it needs, particularly to make electrical energy, and because we are electrical beings, right?
Yes,
So
we are.
your device
Absolutely.
proves our biological systems respond to electrical stimulus
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
obviously the right, yeah.
it's right in the name, electrolytes.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know? Yeah,
Exactly.
and you know, and, yeah.
So you really need the whole package, good diet to provide the right electrolytes, the right good fats, the right amino acids, and the right proportion, um, because that feeds the electrical system. But
Mhm.
we may have had some traumas which deplete magnesium, maybe not the right lifestyle, the right diet, too much junk food, exposure to chemicals. Lots of things can block the
Mhm.
electrical nervous system pathways. And we know that there are very well-defined pathways and circuits and cabling, such as is evidenced by acupuncture.
Mhm.
And way they tap into certain meridians, and through that electrical stimulation with the needles, reconnect the electron flow, the electrolyte connections between
Mhm.
those highways and the meter box. All the
Yeah,
wires. We
sure.
are we are a biological machine, right?
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned that we are electrical beings, and I definitely agree with that. I think that that's something that a lot of us don't realize, that the frequencies, that electrical current, that is the communication of the nervous system, is electricity. That's the language of the nervous system. And sometimes the connection, or I think really the kind of the receiver of that, which is the thalamus in the brain, sometimes its job is to kind of interpret those electrical signals.
Yeah.
And sometimes that interpretation gets off, and then your brain will make up a story which may manifest as anxiety. And so with CES, it specifically targets the thalamus. In natural health, we always talk about the root cause, getting to the root cause. And CES literally goes straight to the root cause, and acts specifically on the root cause of the misinterpretation of the information that comes through the nervous system.
It's like flipping a switch to
It
go
does. It's like
from
an on switch for calm.
sympathetic to parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, and
Yep.
feeling like you're safe and in a
Hmm.
calm space. And only in that mode can we repair cells. Can the body
Yes.
detox itself properly? Can the brain detox? Because we need to feel calm and relaxed in order to go into deep sleep cycles. And during deep sleep, you have the melatonin release and lots of uh, brain cleansing hormones, where the whole central nervous system is cleaned during the rapid eye movement, during the deep sleep cycles. That's why when we don't get good deep sleep, we feel like we haven't slept at all. And we,
Yeah.
we get headaches and, all sorts of nervous system disorders. That's why I feel really sorry for shift workers because the lack of sleep is one of the biggest stresses on the body. That actually causes magnesium loss as well in
Hmm.
huge amounts. So then we need to put a lot back to recover resources because we're churning through it so much. But if we can have techniques where we can relax on call, which is what it sounds like with the device. It's quick, it's
Yeah.
fast. You don't have to wait for something to go through a process.
Hmm.
It's like there straight away to help get over that first hurdle, to
Yeah.
then
And I think it's,
recalibrate. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
No, no.
Sandy. I think it's also like CES and magnesium. I think that they're great companions for each other. They address a lot of the same things, but in different ways. Like, for example, magnesium, helps calm the muscles or relax the muscles by counteracting calcium.
Yep.
Um, and CES does something similar by increasing cholinesterase, which is the enzyme that comes in and helps them relax. They both support sleep in different ways.
Yep.
And I think that's an excellent example of, I don't think I'm anti any modality that is
No.
helpful. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I think that they all, like you mentioned, the toolbox,
It's
broadening the
got
toolbox.
to work together in a package because there's a synergistic effect also between various
Yeah.
nutrients. Well, how I see that use of your device is that it's a shortcut but it can't replace the resources we need to make electricity. So if your tank is low, you still need to refill that tank with
Of
the
course.
resources necessary to make that electrical system work. But as you
Mhm.
said, if something's gone wrong with the messaging and the brain gets into a bad habit, it needs a
Yeah.
prod
Yes,
to
absolutely.
to
Mm.
move back to the correct connections so the messages are correct. Yeah? Is that
Yeah,
good
I agree with
description?
that. Yeah, because essentially where CES really does the most correction is in the way that the messages are received. Sometimes the messages sent from the body are interpreted and received in a way that isn't adaptive in that situation. The fight or flight response, we need that for survival. It is adaptive in some situations, but sometimes it gets a little carried away and becomes maladaptive. And that what CES can do is retrain the ability of a brain and body to have the same understanding of what type of response is appropriate in a situation by making the brain more familiar, more calm with, more familiar with the calm state. That
Yep.
brain space, it's sleep part of it, but also awake, the awake restful state when you process, you remember, you think creatively, you daydream.
How to digest properly. Rest
Mhm.
and
Yes, that
digest.
is the rest to digest. Yeah, like the calm, awake state, meditative brain state. It's a shortcut to that brain state, the same brain state that a person is in when they're meditating, actually.
Yes. And so there's the chicken and egg. Sometimes it's hard to get into meditation if, the adrenaline's pumping and you're in fight or flight. And it's hard to control that hormone once it's racing through the body. If you haven't had enough practice, you haven't had the pathways established for your memory to tap into, oh, that's what I've done before, I'm going to switch to this mode. If you're not used to it, then it's helpful to have another way to get onto that track, that the right train track.
Yeah, because the brain is just such a habitual organ. Its job is to actually be as lazy as possible, and it forms habits. And sometimes it just falls into the habit of an on alert, hypervigilant state that isn't appropriate or necessary in situations. And of course, I don't have to tell you the long-term effects of, having cortisol going all the time when you don't need to. It can have the ripple effects of chronic stress are just, they can't really be quantified. And this, what I like to say is it helps the brain be not only more familiar with the calm state, but also because it's more familiar, it can go to it more easily.
Yeah,
We talked about like what happens after just one session, but you're not going to like completely change all of your habits with one session. And that's why like
the key
using
is the
it.
repetition.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
That makes sense. And it's not even just for just extreme cases. So you mentioned
No.
chronic anxiety. So that can be a low level for a long time, which also wears you out. And people then often go to other bad habits to compensate, such as overeating or overconsumption of alcohol, because that gives them a temporary relaxed state by
Yeah,
numbing and dumbing, but it doesn't address the problem, does it? It doesn't
good
actually
point.
fix the core issue.
Yeah, good point. Yes, you're right. Because yeah, it's not just that the problem isn't just how a person doesn't feel calm, but yeah, they're always gonna, people need to find a way to cope, to find a way to
Get past
become
that
able to get
irritation
through something.
of I
Yeah.
can't sit still, I can't, I don't feel safe, something's wrong, the
Mhm.
mind's racing. Oh, I'm gonna eat something sweet, or
Yeah.
I'm gonna drink a bottle of wine, or and then I don't have
Right.
to worry about it because temporarily you've numbed and dumbed the whole electrical system. But you do damage over time. You can
Yeah.
move into diabetes and heart disease and all sorts of other issues, even cancer,
Yeah, and
because
I think it makes the problem worse too.
yeah,
It's like if when a toddler's acting up, you give them candy, well, they're going to be quiet in the moment, but it just creates a bigger monster.
yep. And
And
then you
same
need
thing.
more and more of
Exactly.
that.
Yeah. Right.
that numbing and dumbing agent. So
Yes,
it becomes addictive because then
absolutely.
we need more to get the same effect.
Yeah.
So I see a device like this is really helping to bring back the good discipline in a good way, to establish the memory of how it feels to be feeling good and calm naturally, that people may have forgotten that state.
Yeah, I mean, we're just
Yeah.
helping people do something that is already intended. Like it's a natural process. It's intended to be our baseline, our, the default mode. It's just teaching people to do something we're that should come natural to a lot of us, but something just gets off and it isn't. We're not really not reinventing the wheel. We're just giving the brain the frequency of calm. You give it that current, and it just kind of knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
And
And
then we learn how to get
it's
back.
not like a drug because you're not overriding a system. You're
No,
enabling the
yeah,
body, the brain to do what it needs to do to get the job done where it may have been blocked before or the
mhm.
messaging pathway's been lost. So
Yeah,
you're just recovering something that's very natural, but not blocking or overriding anything. In other words, if you use it to feel calm, but there is a valid reason to be in fight or flight because there's something dangerous or something that has to be addressed quickly, you have to have quick twitch muscles in driving the car to avoid perhaps an accident. You have to have those reflexes and responses. So a
yeah,
drug may dumb that down, but
yes, that's a good point.
when the body's working well, it can switch and do exactly what it needs to do in the right time and the right moment for the right reason.
Absolutely, yeah. It helps a person's heart rate variability. It's known to directly positively impact that. And I appreciate what you said there, the difference, it'll calm the body similar to the way a benzodiazepine will. However, if you take a benzodiazepine and then there is a situation where you should respond quickly, where you should have fight or flight kick in, a benzodiazepine is going to prevent that.
It's all
But
right. It
CES
doesn't matter.
wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. But see, yes, you're still going to be able to have an appropriate safety awareness and adjust as needed. It just brings it into a more appropriate uh, interpretation of those messages.
Yes. Yeah, it totally makes sense. So it's very fascinating when people want to know more about what you do or how the device works or where they can even get one, where should they go?
You could go to our website at www.neurovanacalm.com. So Neurovana is Neurovana, calm, CALM.com. And you can get one there. You can learn more about it. And then you could also go to my LinkedIn or Instagram too. It's my Instagram is so just Neurovana Calm is
Yep.
Instagram.
I
Yeah,
will also put it in the show notes underneath the video.
perfect. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really an interesting conversation and really important. People need to become more mindful of options available so that they can be more self-regulated and not so
Agreed.
reactive. And we
Yeah.
might end up with a better world.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to have this very interesting and intelligent conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. That's what we do, or try to.
Yeah,
Take
thank you
care.
so much. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I hope you liked this conversation and will share it with others. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you want to listen to other Body Charge conversations, click like, subscribe, the bell icon, and click all notifications. Subscribe to our newsletter to get updates on blogs, podcasts, videos, and magnesium special offers at electromagnesium.com.au. Relax, recharge, and recover.